Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll be starting shortly. In the meantime, I just want to lay a couple ground rules just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Everyone will be muted during the presentation. We encourage you to, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. We'll try to get around to as many as possible. We have about 300 or so live participants today, so there's a good amount of people. So please make sure that you stay muted throughout the entire process.
Can see you or not?
Oh, we're going to. Again, if you guys have any questions, make sure you use the chat. If for whatever reason we do experience some technical difficulties, just bear with us. 9 times out of 10, we do pretty well on Zoom. However, if something does happen, just jump right back in. We'll try to work things out as best as possible. In the meantime, I do want to encourage everyone to utilize the name or renaming tool by highlighting your name and renaming yourself to whatever you want to call yourself. But more importantly, just let us know what country you're from or what state you're from. We have, I think something like 30 plus countries, 30 plus states and 15 plus countries represented in today.
No puedes estar moviendo el celular.
For those of you who are, it looks like we're getting just about to the 100 people that are joining, many more people to come. Please make sure that you stay muted throughout the entire process. There are about 300 people for this live conversation today. If you'd be so kind, we have about 30 or so states and about 15 different countries represented in today's discussion. Rename yourself so we know what country you're from or what state you're from. We very much like to know. Debbie, I think your phone is coming through on that sound.
That is my phone.
Oh, gotcha.
Sorry.
So for those who are just joining, just a couple ground rules to make sure that we're all aware of. We have about 300 plus participants for today's interactive call. So we're asking you to utilize the chat box, please, to ask those questions or have that conversation. We're going to try to get around to as many questions as possible. If for whatever reason we experience some kind of Zoom difficulties, which 9 times out of 10 we don't. However, if we do, just bear with us. You know, as always, we're in the age of technology and sometimes it fails us a little.
So now the time being 11:32. Is it okay for us to commence our countdown? Doug, you want to give me the go ahead?
Sure, let's give it a minute we have a good amount of people that are allowed. And Debbie, that chat box and everything that's coming, there we go. The meeting controls are coming through.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Should I have my mic off during this?
Yes, please.
All right.
Right. So welcome everyone. We're going to start shortly here. Just a couple ground rules for those who have just joined. Please just keep your mic muted throughout the process. We have about 300 plus participants represented by about 15 different countries and about 30 different states. Please go right ahead and rename yourself. Give us a little hello in the chat box. Make sure that you're there. We'd love to have a conversation. If we
Tell us where you're from in the chat box.
The what? I'm sorry?
Tell us where you're from in the chat box as well.
Yes, please do.
If you're listening in, we're just waiting. We still are admitting a number of people into the room. Waiting on our mission control to say it's okay to go. Are we good to go?
I think we're good to go. I think we have a good amount of people joining, and we'll leave it. It is what it is, right?
So I'm looking at your videos now. I know you're all muted, but I think it might be appropriate for us to do a countdown for today's session. I see a lot of young students on the line. Would you help me count down from 10 to start today's show? Let's go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4,
3, 2, 1.
Liftoff. So thank you for joining me today on Tesla Unwired. We are very excited about today's guest. For those of you who are joining us for the first time and may not have participated in a Tesla Unwired or are aware of the Tesla Science Center, we saved Nikola Tesla's last standing lab a handful of years ago with a world record-breaking crowdfunding campaign that many of you had participated in. We raised $1.4 million in 6 weeks from 108 countries, all 50 states in the United States, and 33,000 total donors. Our crowd and membership has grown. We are close to 100,000 supporters now, and people taking our newsletter and staying engaged with the center as we begin to put a shovel in the ground to open our center at Nikola Tesla's last standing lab, Wardenclyffe. We will be launching a museum, a science center, and a business accelerator innovation space on the 16-acre property located here in New York State, about an hour and a half east of New York City. But today's program is a example of our commitment to providing virtual content and programming for everyone around the world who appreciate Nikola Tesla and appreciates our mission, which is sharing Nikola Tesla's ethos, the improvement of humanity through innovation. Today, our guest is Dr. Greg Olsen, and I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Olsen the day that the board of Tesla Science Center celebrated the purchase of the historic Wardenclyffe lab with the proceeds of that crowdfund. And there was an event at the New Yorker Hotel, which was Nikola Tesla's last home. He lived at the New Yorker Hotel. And
you can go upstairs and listen to it when it's done.
introduced to Dr. Olsen and I was told that aside from participating in the crowdfund, that he was an example of a Tesla of today, an inventor, a very successful entrepreneur, building 2 companies and selling them, a venture capitalist, but more importantly is the scientist in him. He was able to work extremely hard to actually get into space and perform some of his studies. So we'll have a number of questions for Dr. Olsen. Again, if you just signed on, please write your questions in this chat box, and we will ask them after Dr. Olsen's presentation. Without further ado, I welcome Dr. Gregory Olsen. Thank you for joining our program.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'm going to get right into the presentation so that we'll have as much time as we can for question and answers. I'm going to begin with, how I started 2 companies and go through the mechanics of that. And then the last half of the presentation will just be about space. So let's start off with the next view graph with my biography. And I'm not going to read this all to you. You can read as well as I can. But I have a bunch of technical degrees. I have a PhD. I started and sold 2 companies. And I'm going to drill down and tell you more about them. I was a cosmonaut, and now I'm a venture capitalist. So it sounds pretty impressive, all right? But the real story is on the next slide. Next. All right. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and grew up in northern New Jersey, graduated Ridgefield Park High School. My mom was a teacher. My dad was an electrician. I always had side and summer jobs from age 8. I was not a particularly good high school student, failed trigonometry. I got in trouble, was suspended from school twice. First time on the night of the prom. You want to see a furor over that. I was basically a C student. In fact, I got all C's my first semester in college, all right? The dean came to me and said, you better pick it up, Olsen, or you're out. But somehow I managed to pick it up, and I became a B+ student in 4 years of physics and engineering at Fairleigh Dickinson University. And during summers, I worked as an electrician's helper in Local 3, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. And Local 3 paid my way through college, not from scholarship, but from giving me the ability to work and earn the money through. So I'll be eternally grateful for that. And I just wanted to have this slide to show you that, it's not all roses. So next slide. Okay, now let's drill down. I worked for a company, RCA Labs, as a research scientist for 11 years. And I just suddenly got the idea that I wanted to start my own company. And I have no business background. I haven't even had a course in accounting. But I was so driven by this idea that I worked my way with 5 people. And it took me 6 months. But finally, I was able to get an investment of $1.5 million from a venture capitalist, Warburg Pincus, and my mentor, Henry Crisell. Our primary business was just making fiber optic detectors. This is when the internet didn't even exist in public, and fiber optics was just coming into being. And I'm lucky to have been on the ground floor of that at RCA Laboratories. So we worked on these fiber optic detectors for 5 years, and by 1989, we were up to 55 people, 5 million in revenues, and we got acquired by Nippon Sheet Glass in 1990 for $12 million, which was, more money than I had ever seen in my life. The last dot is just a footnote. Now, after a year, I left and I started my own company, and I had nothing to do with the last bullet here. But Epitax was acquired by JDS Uniphase in 1999 for a sum of $400 million. Now, you know, that's quite an accomplishment, but I have to be truthful. I'm more proud of the fact that by that time, Epitax had almost 1,000 employees. And, you know, to create that many jobs is, to me, the purpose of entrepreneurship. All right, so now I was owned by another large company, and they treated us very well. But after a year, you know, I just got the startup bug again. And I began a company called Sensors Unlimited, which did infrared sensing. We took those little fiber optic detectors and we made arrays of them, both linear and 2 dimensions, so that we could do imaging in the so-called near infrared spectrum, or, you know, the 1 to 2 micron range. It had applications like night vision. We could see in the dark. We could differentiate water and ice, and there's a number of industrial applications. We were mostly an R&D company. We existed on government contracts. Anyone who's thinking of starting a technology business, find out what the letters SBIR mean, because it's a lucrative source of money from the government for startups. So, you know, we went from mostly an R&D company to, by 1999, we were mostly a commercial company, selling both linear photo detectors for internet applications, as well as the infrared cameras. By 1999, we were 12 million in revenues and highly profitable. And in the year 2000, we got acquired by Finisar Corporation for a number, put at $600 million, which is a phenomenal uptick. Now, we weren't actually acquired for that much cash. We were acquired for 20 million shares of Finisar. And since at that time, each share was worth $30, you can do the math, and that's where the number came up. And anyone with a little bit of gray hair will remember back in the year 2000, everybody thought stocks were worth more than cash. Just like, 12 years ago, during the real estate boom of 2006 and 7, everyone thought houses were worth more than cash. That exists for about a year and then crashes. So the market crashed, and in 2002, we bought our company back for $6 million. Now, you may think, wow, what a wizard this guy is. You know, he bought it back for a penny on the dollar. But I told you that we were acquired for shares that were worth $30. When we bought ourselves back, those shares were worth about 50 cents. So if you do the math, buying ourselves back for $6 million wasn't such a bad deal. And we had to rebuild the company anyway, which we did, focusing now on defense applications, night vision, infrared imaging. And in 2005, just before I went to space, we were acquired by Goodrich Corporation for $60 million, this time in cash. Again, I left the company at that time. And as a footnote, a few years later, Goodrich was acquired by, after the acquisition of Goodrich, they were acquired by United Technology, which would give the company a value of somewhere around $200 million at the time. But so once I went into space, I switched over from being an entrepreneur to funding other entrepreneurs as a venture capitalist. Now, next couple of slides will give you, some of my summaries of what I've learned from this. Next, March of 2000, it was a crazy time. Anything high tech would immediately get investment. You could raise money. You know, if you had a business plan that said fiber optics on it, you could get $5–10 million. Valuations rose over 10 times. True frenzy. Good time to sell, just like in real estate. Next slide. Next slide. October 2002, everything reversed. The market crashed. Now nobody wants stocks. Cash is king. Very difficult to get in kind of investments. Values drop 10x. Good time to buy. Just like in real estate. But most people do the reverse. when the prices are all dropping, they sell because they're afraid they're going to lose money. But just always remember, you never lose or gain money until you sell. So again, buy when it's down, sell when it's up. Next. All right, here's a table I've made of the availability of money, people, facilities over time. And you see as you go down the list, from 84 to 90, it's poor, good, always changing. The market is always changing. But what's not changing is if you look out on the right is leverage. And what I mean by leverage is the ability to trade off those three on the left: capital, people, and facilities. Now, let me give you an example. In 1984, it was kind of a recession, and it was hard to raise money. But because it was a recession, there was a lot of unemployment, so it was easy to hire people. There was a lot of empty space, so you could get cheap rent. So you may not have the money to buy these. You may not be able to pay high salaries, but you can trade that off with stock in your new company. In 1992, another recession time, I made a deal with a landlord. I signed a 5-year lease, and he gave me the first 6 months free rent. So I traded signing a lease for money. Never think that money is the answer to your problems. It's only one of many resources you can use to solve problems or to start companies. So I just thought this chart might be a good illustration of that. Next. Okay. Sensors Unlimited was a highly successful company, but we didn't exist in a vacuum. We had lots of help. My buddy Steve Forrest was a professor at Princeton University, and when he arrived there just about the same time I was starting Sensors Unlimited. So he helped me get going, and we helped him start his lab. We worked with Sarnoff Corporation, which was RCA Laboratories, Rutgers, NJIT, many different organizations. One that I belong to is New Jersey Technology Council, which is a great networking organization. I belong to IEEE, the International Electronic and Electrical Engineers Association. Best advice I could give anybody who wants to start up is network. Go out and meet people, and just constantly meet people. That's how you'll hire great people. That's how you'll find investment. Next. Okay. Since I've actually done 3 successful sales of companies, people sometimes come to me asking for help. And what I tell them is, you can't force the market. I don't have some magic formula that makes things happen. It's all about timing. As I mentioned before, sell when it's high and buy when it's low. And it might not be the right time to sell your company, but what you can do is be ready. Have a good management team, good team presentation, and don't hold out for the best price. Get a good price, be satisfied, and walk away, just like when you sell a house. So, next. Okay, some of the things I learned, always like lean and mean. I don't like fancy chrome buildings and leased BMWs and super high salaries. I just like to keep things lean and mean. Probably the most important thing I did was I hired people who were better than me. And I joke a little bit saying that's not too difficult, but I found a lot of people are intimidated and afraid of people who they perceive are better than them, thinking they may take over or something. I welcome that. If I want to have people around me that say, no, you're making a mistake, that's wrong, here's what I think you should do, and let them take over. In my opinion, good managers work for their people, not the other way around. It's not a matter if you're the boss, you tell everybody what to do. No, my role as a boss is to enable people, see how I can help them and enable them to do their jobs better. So I've found that if you bring on good people and let them take over, work hard, success will eventually follow. And the last part of this is you're gonna make mistakes no matter how good you are or who you are. So don't try to avoid mistakes. Just deal with them. After you make them, recognize you make a mistake and be willing to go back and change what you did. Next. So summation, it's not about technology and it's not about markets, it's about people. And if you'll focus on the people side of not only your business, but your company, you'll do very well. So that's kind of the end of the business part. Let me do the next slide. This is about what I do now, which is venture capital. I've invested in a number of companies. Power survey company did stray voltage detection in cities. We just sold them this summer. They were highly, highly successful. Tom Katniss and Dave Kalakaitis started a great company, and it came out of Sarnoff Labs, but this was a business that didn't exist, and they started it. So highly successful. One of my current investments, United Silicon Carbide with Chris Dries. They make the next generation of power transistor. Just as, you know, silicon carbide makes better, sharper tools than iron or steel, silicon carbide makes a better power transistor than silicon. Of course, it's more expensive and harder to make, but these guys are, have really done a fabulous job, and they now compete with companies like Cree and Infineon and other makers. Who else do we have there? Be Able Education is a new company started by Saki Dodelson, which is basically an internet system to improve reading abilities, not just reading, but learning, SAT and ACT training. Saki had started a company, Achieve 3000, which was extremely successful, and many of you might recognize that name. And now she's out with a new one called Be Able. And finally, one of my last ones, Safety Vantage, started by the Snyman brothers up in Canada. And they basically work on forms for businesses to make sure that they're complying with government regulations. So that's my current occupation. So let's get on to the fun part of the presentation, being space. This is what a Soyuz rocket looks like. Now, I trained for 6 months in Russia. I'm not a professional astronaut, but you just can't hop on a rocket and fly. You've got to learn, you know, how do you put the spacesuit on? How do you get in and out of a rocket? What happens if there's a fire or a toxic gas leak? So I trained very intensely in Moscow for 6 months. And I'm not afraid to say the hardest part of the training was trying to learn Russian. Ya gabaru по-русски не очень хорошо, for those that understand. Just said I don't speak Russian very well. So that's what the Soyuz looks like, and it's an extremely reliable rocket. This is the three of us. No, you can flip to the next. Yeah, this is me on the left, just before our launch. Cosmonaut Valery Tokarev, our commander, in the middle, and astronaut Bill MacArthur on the right. This was almost 15 years ago, and we've remained great friends, and we usually see each other about once a year. The Association of Space Explorers has a convention every year, and we should have met already, but you know, because of the virus, we've had to postpone the meeting. So next. Here's what it looks like inside the Soyuz. Very cramped and crowded with lots of equipment. And, you know, this was in October 2005. It took us 2 days to get to the space station after launch. Now they can do it in 4 to 6 hours because they have much better guidance systems. But back then we had to make 34 orbits. So next. Here's our actual launch from Kazakhstan. We went from 0 to 17,000 miles an hour in less than 10 minutes. And in order to do that, we accelerated at a rate that put G forces on us of about 3.5 times gravity, or 3.5 Gs. So we got into orbit in less than 10 minutes, but we had to make 34 orbits before we could actually dock at the station. The next slide. This shows a picture of me inside the Soyuz capsule once we were in orbit. After we orbited for about an hour, we leak checked the system and were able to open up our visors and take our gloves off. You see I'm carrying a video camera, and that was used to take many of the videos that I'm going to show you. And to my knowledge, it's still up on the space station now. Next. Here's our docking. This is Soyuz coming up to the space station. It looks like slow motion. We're actually both traveling at about 17,500 miles an hour, but we're moving together synchronously, so that looks like slow motion. Took us about an hour to dock. And once we open the hatch, you can go to the next slide. If you go next slide. All right. Video of us coming into the space station. We open the hatch. And here's astronaut Bill MacArthur arriving. On the right is cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev, and astronaut John Phillips is at the top. Here comes cosmonaut Valery Tokarev. And finally, here comes Greg, lugging his video camera. All right, next. Here's what it looks like when you're weightless. Everyone asks me, what was the best part of being in space? And that's it right there, just floating weightless. I mean, I was like that for 10 days. And I tell you, it's like magic. I don't know what other word to use for it, but just being at weightless at equilibrium, just best feeling I ever had. So next. Here's the view looking outside. Back down on Earth.
You see a nice picture of the world. Here's the Soyuz that I will return on. Optical transfer chamber. And you can see not only solar cells, but you can see the arm, the robot arm. And another interesting view of the world.
Next. Here, you know, looking out at sunset, we get 16 sunrises and sunsets every day because it only takes 90 minutes to orbit the Earth. And when I saw how thin the atmosphere is relative, that's just the blue stuff you see. It's just mind-boggling, and it reminded me, you know, how precious air is. And, you know, I thought, luckily we brought our own oxygen, because otherwise we'd be finished. So it was just a very moving scene to me. Next. Here's how you drink water in space. In a weightless environment, due to surface tension and Earth, a water drop assumes a spherical shape. Yeah. Now here's how you eat in space. Food has to be kind of sticky so it stays in the can. That's cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev. At that world's record of 803 days in space. Not at one time, but cumulative. Next.
Here's Greg typing as you can only do it in 0G. Now, if you notice, it's kind of interesting. Just the pressure of his fingertips on the keyboard lifts him up to the ceiling. How about that? As he slowly disappears into all the storage containers.
Notice I don't have any shoes on because you don't need them in a weightless environment. Newton's law of inertia, a body in motion tends to remain in motion. Next. The famous space toilets that sometimes fail. That's astronaut John Phillips bringing in one, and that's astronaut Bill MacArthur on the ground, sealing up and removing the old, which is full. They get burned up on when we deorbit.
Look. Yeah. Unstick any pipe with that. Yeah.
John keeps the nuts and bolts in his pocket so that they don't float away. And there you can see the, if you could go back to that for a second, to the end. I don't know if you can. Yeah, right there. If you hold that, you can see the space toilet. The hose, the black hose with the yellow funnel on top, that's used for urination for both male and female space flyers. It's basically a vacuum cleaner hose, and the funnel just sucks up any liquid. I'm not going to get too graphic describing the space toilet, but it's something you can't practice for on Earth. But all I can tell you is when you're done, you slam that white lid as soon as possible. So, and you'll also notice there are foot straps on the floor to hold you down. Next. How do you sleep in space? Any way you want, horizontal, vertical. And you notice how my arms are extended? Because it turns out when you're in a weightless environment, when you're sleeping, natural position for your arms is just to sort of float out, as opposed to, you know, resting by your side where they normally are. But I found the sleep very restful, and, you know, after 1 or 2 days getting used to it, I slept very well. Next. Now I mentioned Sensors Unlimited, and I brought 2 cameras along with me. Unfortunately, they weren't working, but this was a video downlink I did to Princeton, New Jersey, so all the employees could see their cameras.
Let me make one thing very clear. Check out.
Nothing inside.
Due to government restrictions, we weren't allowed to bring a working camera on board. Next. These are chips that we make at Sensors Unlimited. These chips convert heat or the infrared light into a video signal. Those chips back and made cufflinks for all the engineers that had worked on the camera. Here's moment of inertia. You can do this yourself with the notebook. You see how it rotates easily, about 2 axes? Watch this third. It doesn't like to rotate about that axis.
Yeah, not stable.
This is stable.
2 of the axes are stable and 1 isn't, and I can't remember the reason for that.
It's the maximum and minimum moment of inertia. Axes are stable. Intermediate isn't, and it goes back to either one of the other 2. This is very important for satellites that must be rotated during operation. Next. Just some pictures I took. Cape Town, South Africa. Next. I don't remember where this was taken, but there were many, many scenes like this. These were taken with sometimes with telephoto lenses to, you know, sharpen up. But just to see the Earth go by, I mean, what a phenomenal experience, and something that will be with me my entire life. Next. Okay, now these are some shots. These were composed from NASA photos, but here you can see our Soyuz retreating from the space station. The one I launched is attached to the space station at about the middle of the picture. You can see that. That's going to remain for 6 months and be the vehicle for the astronaut and cosmonaut to spend 6 months on. So I came back with John Phillips and Sergei Krikalev in their Soyuz, which had been there for 6 months. Next. You see, space is a vacuum, but remember, we're traveling over 17,000 miles an hour. And when we enter the atmosphere, which is maybe 60 miles above the Earth, the friction is going to cause so much heat that things will burn up. Now, our descent module in the middle has a heat shield, which is that gray area, and that's ablative. It's designed to burn up and convert, you know, the kinetic energy of our motion into heat and slow the vehicle down. Next. Because here's what happens when you enter the atmosphere, and those other 2 modules, which contain the garbage and the old toilet pots, are burn up, but the heat shield keeps us from burning up. This was probably the scariest part of the journey. Shake, rattle, and roll, and you have absolutely no control. And we had an air leak to deal with. And one of my jobs was to open up the emergency oxygen valve while this leak was occurring. And fortunately, I was able to do it. And next slide, we made it through the reentry. And here's how we land in the desert of Kazakhstan via parachute. You see flames. That's because about 3 feet above the ground, retro rockets are fired to further slow our descent down. It was a bit of a jolt, but we landed safely. And the next slide shows, you know, it leaves quite a dent in the earth. But this is a photo of us shortly after we landed. We were pulled out by the rescue crew because the sides of the capsule are still too hot to touch. So next. Okay, next. Yeah, here's a picture of me right after I was pulled out. Here's our crew. Yeah, that's all right. Go to the second one. Okay. After you've been weightless for a period of time, when you come back into a weighted environment, you tend to be dizzy because it throws your vestibular system off, your inner ear. And that's John Phillips on the left, Sergei Krikalev in the middle, and me on the right. And we're sort of treated like medical patients for the next couple of days. And, you know, we're very careful. The third picture. Yeah, here you can see, even though I was able to walk, you know, I had a man on each side of me in case I stumbled, because they took us right into the medical test, did a bunch of medical tests on us, and believe it or not, helicoptered us back to the airport. And that afternoon, we were back in our dormitory in Moscow. So from space to our dormitory all in one day. It's phenomenal. Next. Okay, that capsule I landed in is actually on the Intrepid Museum in New York City. So if you ever want to see a real space capsule that's flown, scorch marks and all, just go visit the Intrepid and you can get a very good look at it. It's right below the space shuttle, which is on the museum. Next. I'll just finish up with some of my other stuff. I have a ranch in Montana, and you know, we have solar energy. And you might say, that's great during the day. What do you do at night? Next. Here's what we do. We charge up batteries. Now, this is a system that I've had for about 12 years, and these were lead acid batteries, and it's not holding that much charge anymore. So my buddy Chris Todd is going to outfit me with a new lithium ion based system so that we can keep going out in Montana. Next. I'm a big Tesla buff. I own 2 Teslas. I own the blue Roadster on the left for 10 years and the SUV, the Model X on the right. In the middle is Chris Dry's Model S. So it's just a nice view of it. Why go electric? Let's look at the next slide. All right, if you could just click through all of these. I'm not going to go through the details, but keep going. Just go right to the bottom. Bottom line is it's not only cleaner, but it's about 6 times cheaper if you do the math. The electricity uses fuel is much, much cheaper than gasoline. The main obstacle with electric is the cost of the batteries. And once batteries come down, I would safely say in 20 years, the majority of cars in America will be electric. So next. All right, that's the end of my presentation. If you want to read more, I have a book on Amazon called By Any Means Necessary. I thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it over to Mark for the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Greg. That was absolutely awesome. The chat box has been very active with a number of questions, and I have a number of questions. But being we have some youngsters on the line and they've been patiently waiting, I'm going to let them get ahead of me and my questions, and I'd like to let them ask some.
All right, well, let me start off. I want to give a shout out to the Suffolk County Family Services, and some of the students we have are Alfred, Lily, Richard, and Alia. And welcome to the presentation. Welcome to space.
Actually, I'm going to let their questions be some of the first questions we ask. So from the Suffolk County Family Service teens, what did you miss the most about space once you got back?
Oh, the weightlessness, just being able to float. It was such a great feeling. And I mean, to realize something wrong here, I can rotate 90 degrees and another, if you're so-called upside down, now it looks right side up, just phenomenal.
And then with that experience, would you ever endeavor to travel to Mars if it was an option?
Only if I can get a return ticket. Yeah.
You talked about, obviously the training you had to go through. How did you prepare mentally and physically for this? What were the...
Well, both. The training, I loved being in Russia. And, being American, I wasn't sure how I'd be treated or what it would be like. But I was treated very well. And I learned, the Russians, they really know space well. I mean, we have to remember they were the first with a satellite and they were the first to orbit a human. Now, I got to tell you, they've got a lot of good space knowledge. And I went from being a little apprehensive to when I was halfway through the program saying, boy, these guys really know what they're doing. And I'm glad for the training I'm getting. I was a student for 6 months. It was Star City is their training ground, the Yuri Gagarin Training Center. And it's kind of like half a college campus and half a military base. And typical day was up at 6 a.m., run around the lake, breakfast, classes 9 to 4, learning all about the vehicle and how it operates, more physical training, dinner, homework, up, go to sleep, get up and do it all over again. So any students here, I had mostly the same kind of life as you.
Well, this isn't a question, but I'm just seeing it in the chat box from Misty and Mira. They said that they were on the edge of their seats for your whole presentation, and they couldn't think of better life advice for their 9-year-old. So,
thank you.
Was it hard to adjust back to Earth life? And I'm going to add to that because I think you answered it a little bit since the question was asked. But I've heard that with a lot of astronauts that we've seen land on the moon, that once you get back, it's hard to get excited about things because you hit such a high. What was that adjustment like?
Well, it was one of the most positive things in my life that occurred. And, after the birth of my 2 daughters, the highlight of my life. But it's just remained a positive glow. It'll be 15 years in September for me, and it's really enhanced my life. I can't think of a single negative thing it did, and just all positives. So, the physical part, it took me about 3 days to readjust. Not to feel dizzy and get back to normal. The other guys took them couple of weeks because they were weightless for 6 months. I was just 10 days. So I was not subject to a lot of things like that or some of the longer term things. My co-flyer, John Phillips, is, some people have vision issues. There are some things that happen, bone, joint issues, but in 10 days, I didn't experience, any of that.
So some folks are trying to know what it was like. We all experience ear popping when we're in an airplane. Was there any of that when you're in a rocket, and is it worse?
Interestingly, no. And the reason, if all goes well, you shouldn't have any ear popping because, the pressure is stabilized. Now, I didn't experience it, but I well may have when we had an air leak because we lost about 25% of our air supply, and that pressure drop could well have popped my ears, but I don't remember experiencing that.
Now, what were the specific exercises you had to do while you were weightless to maintain your physical well-being?
I didn't do much exercising while I was up there, figuring, you know, for the 10 days. But the facilities they have is a bicycle, and they have weights with springs attached to them. And then there's a treadmill. Now you might say, how can you use a treadmill when you're weightless? Well, you have a shoulder harness with springs attached to the floor. So the springs pull you down at an adjustable rate. And that's how you do the exercise. Most space flyers exercise 2.5 hours a day, but the other 22 hours, you know, there's no muscle pulling on your bones. So your bones begin to lose calcium, and long duration flyers experience symptoms due to that.
So if everybody doesn't mind, I want to go a little bit back to some of the other presentation, and then we can come back to the space flight. But I think there's an overarching theme, Greg, that you know, I read a good part of By Any Means Necessary. I skip around a lot. I have an adult onset ADD, so I bounce and read what I want to read, but I will finish it. But I noticed actually some of your friends, by the way, that are mentioned in the book from your childhood are on today's Zoom. So very glad to join us here today. But you know, the overarching theme that I see and that I appreciate is that you describe yourself as an average person with a certain level of tenacity that will just keep working at something to be successful at it. And that rang true with your companies, and it rang true when you said, I'm going into outer space. And there was some adversity there for you to get into outer space, and you had to overcome that. Those lessons for folks that are just getting started in entrepreneurship or starting companies, what does it take? What is your secret formula for success?
I think this single word is tenacity. It's hard, and you will have setbacks, and you will feel like giving up. That I can assure you. But you just have to hang in there through thick and thin, and eventually I think success will follow if you work hard enough. I've never been the best at anything, whether it's as a student in sports, you know, but the example I use when I give school presentations is in Little League. I played Little League ball in Ridgefield Park, and I was so bad that the coach would say, "Hey, Olsen, don't swing. Maybe you'll get a walk." So I came to practice, and I took batting practice. And 5 years later, in Babe Ruth League, I made the All-Star team. And it wasn't because I was that great or such a superstar, but just because I had, you know, persisted and got myself where I could hit decently.
And so in terms of, you know, entrepreneurs just starting out, seeing, you know, I guess Epitax, your first company, you were launching that in the early 80s. You mentioned how around 2000, there was a lot of VC capital, but I got to think in the early 80s, there was a lot of capital, but was that the case? And were you raising venture capital, or did you bootstrap it?
Oh yeah, no, I raised venture capital, $1.5 million. It was in 1983, 84. It wasn't that easy to get. I went through about 5 different companies before I finally got that investment from Warburg Pincus. And my first experience was I walked in and said, I'm trying to raise money to start a company. And they said, can we look at your business plan? And I said, what's a business plan? So they politely showed me the door. But, you know, I went to the library because there was no internet available, and found out what a business plan is, wrote one, you know, had friends read it. They laughed. And, you know, it's just iteration, slowly got better.
You know, you mentioned SBIR, and I just went through a training that the NSF puts on the I-Corps, where they try to train you on the lean startup model, which that seems to kind of been innately in what you've done. I'm assuming you didn't have to go through that training back then, but by
It wasn't
studying.
available.
What's that?
It wasn't available back then.
Right.
That was Roland Tibbett started the SBIR system at National Science Foundation. By the way, SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research. And you can get, over $100,000 in phase 1 and over $1 million in phase 2. And you don't have to pay it back, and you maintain the patent rights. So try it out.
And so the whole goal of the program is that we spend a certain amount on research here in the United States. So I know we have international audience here, but here in the US, and I know the European Union has similar mechanisms, there's a certain amount of money spent on research at our higher education institutions. And then there's an effort to commercialize that research for the public benefit. And SBIR helps to have researchers take their inventions and bring them to market. So now, bringing this back to Nikola Tesla, he was a great inventor or researcher, and was able to bring some things to market that changed our lives. So let me start with that. We met obviously through the Tesla Science Center, and we're here on this program thanks to the Tesla Science Center. And I obviously appreciate Nikola Tesla. That's why I'm involved. What made you get involved, and what do you appreciate about Nikola Tesla?
I've known about him for a long time, being I have a degree in electrical engineering, and there's a unit of magnetization called a Tesla. I've been familiar with him. I tend to agree that Edison gets so much more publicity and awareness. And, I thank Elon Musk for putting the Tesla name back in, in the limelight where I believe it deserves to be. So,
and, I look at guys like you, guys like Elon Musk, as the Teslas of today. And, and I don't disparage Edison whatsoever. He was an inventor in his own right and an entrepreneur. Maybe more of an entrepreneur than an inventor. But if we were to study Tesla, one of the things that could have been more helpful to him was to have that business mentorship and programs like SBIR or the NSF I-Corps. But, when he was paired up with Westinghouse, that's when he was able to invent a great deal of the technologies that were needed for the distribution of alternating current electricity, and that changed our lives. But the question is, when he was here at in Shoreham, which was Wardenclyffe at the time, do you think it was the lack of an active business partner, the CEO to the CTO, that yin and yang, that made this project not progress to where it could have gone? I'm not saying that his current iteration of what he was trying to do would have worked, but inventors and entrepreneurs pivot. Do you think he could have used some mentorship at the end?
Oh, 100%, sure. He needed someone to maybe, like at his spending rate, saying, hey, we're not so sure that the next round is going to come in, so why don't you cool the expenses? He didn't have anyone guiding that, and I think he might have made it through to round 2 or round 3.
Right. I guess so. He got caught in the valley of death that we hear about with entrepreneurs with ideas that they're commercializing. Back to the Teslas of today. Elon Musk, Tesla Motors. Obviously, he is someone like yourself that has been, pretty helpful to us launching the Tesla Science Center. And we are grateful to see the Tesla name on Tesla Motors because it has raised awareness. The remarkable thing about Mr. Musk is he is not just doing electric cars. He's trying to change a paradigm, similar to what Tesla was doing in his day.
Stay tuned Thursday.
Exactly. That's where I was getting, was the fact that you have the experience of going to space. Elon Musk is bringing us to space. Some people asked in the chat box, what was your thought on the United States' responsibility and other countries' responsibilities above and beyond what the Russians are doing? But the United States used to invest so much into it, and now we're relying on Elon Musk. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's good. I think it's the best way to go forward. The issue is, will they invest enough? I think the private sector at this point can do it cheaper. We hope they can do it better. I mean, we're going to find out Thursday if that's the case.
Right.
So
what is Thursday? Because I know we spoke before this program. I wasn't aware of Thursday. Most of the people on the line might not. Can you tell us what's happening Thursday?
Sure. 4:30 p.m. on Thursday, SpaceX is going to launch 2 NASA astronauts into space to get to the space station. And we all hope it happens. I mean, weather, there's all kinds of reasons that, can hold it up. But I'm sure if it's delayed, it'll happen at some time in the very, very near future. And our hope is that, if it's successful, this will give the United States their own means of getting people into low Earth orbit.
I noticed that when you were giving your presentation and you talked about the robot arm, some of the folks that are on the chat from Canada had mentioned that that was a Canadian robot arm.
Yes, it is. That's correct.
The International Space...
And there have been a number of Canadian astronauts as well.
Okay. So the International Space Station, what was your experience? What countries did you see represented there technologically or person-wise?
Well, the European Space Agency, for one. I mean, first of all, it's NASA and Roscosmos, the Russian space agency, were probably the dominant ones at the beginning. But since there's over 16 countries involved, and at this stage, it's truly international. The European Space Agency, Germany, Italy, France, all of the European countries have contributed to that. They have their own modules. JAXA, the Japanese space program, has many parts up there, including their own astronauts. You mentioned Canada, the ARM. There are other things that have come from Canadian technology, as well as a number of astronauts. I trained with Bob Thirst. It is a truly international vehicle at this point.
Now, somebody that understands that and somebody that understands startups and innovation, is there a big opportunity? Like, what are the goals of space? Obviously, you're a supporter of the program moving forward. What are the long-term goals? Is it colonizing Mars? And is there a lot of opportunity from an innovation standpoint and a startup standpoint in that space?
I mean, right now, we're at the stage of like Columbus in 1492, maybe earlier. We're doing the unknown. I mean, I would hope we get to the moon as quickly as possible, because that's the most doable part. Now, there's some argument for forget about the moon, go to Mars, and I am not that detailed knowledgeable where I can offer an opinion on that, except to say, let's pick one and really do it and do it well. Whatever makes the most sense. And would like to see a funded effort, and I think the word funded must be in that statement. It's one thing to propose a program.
Now, in that end goal, like, do you think that's a big step forward to mankind to sustainably be able to live interstellar off the face of the planet and to actually live there and not have the return trip?
Sure. Yeah. Not in our lifetimes, but eventually, the Earth is going to get crowded. Now, I have a ranch in Montana, and my nearest neighbor is 6 miles away. And sometimes I'm 50 miles, 60 miles from Billings Airport, And sometimes I don't see a single car when I drive out there. So I look at all that space and say, wow, you know, how could this ever get filled? But as you know, if population grows exponentially, it won't take long. So long term, we've got to think about colonizing other surfaces. And, you know, whether it's the moon, Mars, I mean, those are technical issues. But I think initially we've got to start getting there to both those places.
Now, having read By Any Means Necessary, space wasn't your first exploration. You once saw a gentleman getting out of the water at a beach in scuba gear and decided you wanted to explore the ocean. Any parallels to your interests there and man's exploration there?
Yeah, here are the parallels. I'm not a big planner or strategizer. You know, people tell you should have a plan in life and you should, you know, like a 5 and 10 year plan, and you should have a strategy in life. And I have to tell you, I've had none of that. I tend to just, you know, suddenly get an idea and fly through it. Actually, I'm moving my head, behind me on the top, you'll see a white paper. That's actually an article from the New York Times describing how it was possible to go into space. I read that article in a Starbucks and I said, wow, I want to do this. And the parallel, you know, when I was in high school, I'm from Jersey, so we go down the shore. And we're on the beach, and 2 guys came out with scuba tanks, came out of the water. And I said, wow, I want to do that. And I'm from the sea hunt generation. And my buddy said, wow, you know, what if your air hose ruptured? You could die. And I'm thinking, no, you could go underwater and breathe and live. You know, I'm looking at the benefits, not the risks. Maybe that's, you know, that you have to have a certain sense of optimism.
You know, that sounds a lot like entrepreneurship too. There are people that will come up with a number of reasons of why not to pursue an idea and an enterprise. And it's the folks that are willing to take a certain number of risks, like a punctured hose, that will get out there and take that risk. One of the questions on, again, your space experience was, were the stars different? When you looked out that window, can you see different constellations that you wouldn't see on Earth?
Yes, and it makes the ones that you're very familiar with sometimes difficult to observe. Now, here's why. The Big Dipper, you know, almost anybody can recognize that, you know, on a somewhat clear day. But when you're in space, you know, you don't have the atmosphere blocking a lot of the dim stars. So now when you see the Big Dipper, it's not as obvious because you have a lot of little white dots around it, and you have to look a little more difficult, more harder to perceive it. Now, we're hardly any closer to the stars or planets than we are on Earth, but we don't have the atmosphere blocking us, so you do get to see more.
While you were in space, one of the questions I failed to ask that came up was weightlessness. Did it feel like you were falling? Did it feel like you were swimming, or none of the above?
Kind of none of the above. I think maybe swimming might be the closest that you could have. But even when you're swimming, you usually have a sense of up and down. Now that can be a problem, as you know, if you lose your orientation. But assuming you have a sense of orientation, you know, you'll know that you're upside down or sideways. And when you're weightless, you really don't. I used to, you know, the station is about 150 feet long, and you saw the one video where I was traversing it. And I used to do that and rotate 90 degrees and just experience you know, like I'd be so-called upside down. And now all of a sudden your brain allows you to say, hey, that's down and this is up. Just interesting stuff.
I noticed in some of my notes that you are a licensed ham radio operator. Is it ham radio or?
Technically, yes. Now, when I was in high school, I had an amateur license, and we used Morse code back then. Now most people use telephony, but I did have to renew my license, which I did in Star City. Took the test, and you know, so I got my license back, and I had my own call letters, and we did ham radio sessions. I did Ridgefield Park High School, where I graduated. I did Fort Hamilton High in Brooklyn, you know, where I was born, and I did Princeton High School, where I live now.
And from when you were in the space station, you were able to do ham radio, or is this?
Yes,
while you were
yes, there's a ham station up, and obviously it's in big demand to contact.
That is pretty remarkable. So is there, I don't understand, is there a repeater, or how does it get from the space station to
your repeaters? Yes.
Okay.
You know, there are a series of satellites that can boost it.
So that's, you know, we have, when we have events at Tesla, and you've been at some of them, I'm sure you've noticed that we have the ham radio enthusiasts from the New York metro area usually put up a booth, and they see Tesla as the inventor of ham radio, and actually the U.S. Supreme Court sees him as the inventor of radio.
By the way, for you young folks out there, ham radio was our internet when we were age.
You know, some of those enthusiasts, they see it as an important line of either defense or communications in an emergency. Do you think it's still an important backlink for folks to be able to communicate? Should there be a natural catastrophe, or
Absolutely.
What is different between that? Okay. Well, what's different about it? What makes it so resilient?
Look, it's radiation. You know, it's the same as, hey, now we have walkie-talkies and we have radio systems that, you know, can go many thousands of miles. I think we have maybe more efficient systems of communicating than ham radio. But even, you know, if you have to go back to Morse code, it's something that you can always put up if you have a battery, and, you know, if it's a disaster area and you lose all power, hams are very resourceful, and they usually all have backup power supplies. And you find that in hurricanes and you know, any kind of disasters, that there are still ham radio operators that are useful in the communications. So it's something that I don't think while it's shrunken much since I was a teenager, it's not going to go away, and I sure hope it never goes away.
Thank you. So some folks commented that it looks like they're moving up the SpaceX launch to tomorrow, probably for weather reasons.
Okay.
So everybody check your local listings and don't miss that. Greg, is there anything that I didn't ask that I should have asked, or any parting comments?
No, just when you get that feeling inside you that you want to do something, do it. Just follow your gut. Whether it's learning how to play guitar or going into space, just follow it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time to impart your wisdom on us, and in a number of areas, entrepreneurship, life lessons, and your experience in space. And we're very grateful for you know, all of your efforts on helping us here at the Tesla Science Center.
Thank you, Mark. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. All right, all. Have a great day, and feel free to share the taping of today's episode and help spread the message. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. If you're interested in getting a copy of this, we will be sending it around. It'll be posted up on our website. Again, just visit back our website in the next couple days. We're going to end this chat shortly, but stay tuned for our next video podcast. We are just working out some logistics right now on the final one, but I think we'll post it over the next couple days. And if you like this, shoot us an email of people that you may be interested. We're always looking for what would be the Teslas of today to be on these podcasts, to have interesting discussions about what is happening now, but more importantly, what will happen in the future. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a good day, and we'll see you at the next podcast. Bye, everyone.